Your son is alive." The words hit Andrew Winslow like a thunderclap. The sun was dipping low behind the glass towers of the city, casting long shadows over the crowded parking lot outside a bustling food court. The air smelled of fried food and exhaust fumes, mixed with the faint scent of rain lingering from an afternoon drizzle. Andrew stood frozen beside his black luxury SUV, a man used to having everything: money, influence, respect. But none of that mattered here, not now. A boy stood in front of him, a thin, raggedy figure, barely more than a child. His skin was dark and cracked from cold and dirt, and he walked with a limp that made his every step uneven, like a metronome gone off beat. His clothes hung loose, patched and stained, yet his eyes were sharp, burning with something Andrew hadn't seen in a long time: truth. "I was in that van," the boy said quietly, voice low but steady, as if the words weighed a ton, yet he refused to drop them. "We were sold, one after another. Your son was the last." Andrew blinked, struggling to process. The boy's name was Malik. He was no one in this world, a homeless kid with no home, no family, barely a place to sleep. But here he was, telling Andrew Winslow, the billionaire, the powerful man who ruled companies worth billions, that his son was alive, that he had been kidnapped, that he was part of a dark secret Andrew never imagined. What do you mean?" Andrew stammered, voice cracking despite himself. His mind flashed back to the night his son disappeared. A family camping trip, a moment of carelessness, a boy gone without a trace. The endless searches, the cold leads, the polite lies told by authorities who had long since given up, the hole in his heart that never healed. Malik's eyes didn't waver. "They call it the elite adoption ring," he said. "Children are taken. Not just anywhere, from families like yours and mine. Sold for millions. The lighter the skin, the higher the price. Your boy? Bought for $80,000. Andrew's throat tightened. His fists clenched until his knuckles turned white. The boy's words were a slap of cold water. He had been lied to. "They took him while you were asleep," Malik said. "The counselors at the camp. They weren't who they said they were. They worked for people who don't care about laws, senators, judges, people with power you never see." Andrew swallowed hard, trying to breathe through the rising panic. "Why are you telling me this? Why come to me?" Malik shifted his weight, grimaced from the limp. "Because I ran. I escaped. I've seen faces, cars, houses where kids are kept like cattle. I saw the man who bought your son, I remember, and I want to help." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Around them, the world moved on. Cars pulled up, people chatted, kids laughed. But Andrew's entire universe had shrunk to this moment, this boy. His mind raced. Was this some cruel trick? A desperate lie? But the conviction in Malik's voice, the way his eyes held no doubt, told a different story. A story of suffering, of survival. "Do you have proof?" Andrew asked, his voice barely a whisper. Malik reached into a torn backpack and pulled out a crumpled photo, edges frayed. It showed a group of children, smiling through dirt and bruises, faces masked with forced hope. And in the back, just barely visible, was a boy Andrew recognized immediately. His son. Tears stung Andrew's eyes, blurring the edges of the photo. "God," he breathed, "he's alive." Malik nodded solemnly. "Alive, but trapped. And if we don't act fast, he'll disappear again. Maybe forever." Andrew's legs felt like jelly. He was a man used to calling the shots, to commanding armies of assistants, lawyers, and security. But here, in the parking lot, he was powerless. He pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed the police. "This is Andrew Winslow," he said once connected. "My son disappeared months ago. I have new information. He's alive, and I want you to investigate." The officer on the other end was calm but skeptical. "Sir, can you verify this information?" Andrew glanced at Malik, who met his gaze unflinchingly. "I will," Andrew promised. As the call ended, Malik leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "They don't want this to come out. Too many names involved, people who decide who gets punished and who doesn't." Andrew swallowed hard. "Then we'll make sure they don't silence us." Malik's face softened slightly for the first time. "I've seen too much to stay quiet," he said. "But I can't do this alone. You have the means. Together, maybe we can bring them down." Andrew nodded slowly, a fire lighting inside him. "This is bigger than me now," he said. "Bigger than money or power. This is about justice, about my son, about all the children lost in the shadows." He looked back at Malik, worn, battered, but unbroken. "Tell me everything," Andrew said. That night, in the quiet of his mansion, Andrew sat alone in his study. The weight of Malik's words pressed down like a storm. He stared at the photo again, his son, smiling despite everything. Memories came flooding back, the laughter on that camping trip, the sudden scream when the boy vanished, the police report filed with hope, the silence that followed. He had been told to move on, that the boy was gone, that life had to go on. But Malik's revelation shattered the illusion. Andrew opened his laptop, started digging into missing children reports, police files, and private security logs. Names, dates, patterns emerged, strange disappearances, false leads, unexplained hush-ups. The more he uncovered, the clearer it became. This was not an accident. It was a deliberate, systematic crime, protected by layers of power and corruption, senators who turned blind eyes, judges who dismissed cases, wealthy buyers who saw children as commodities. Andrew clenched his jaw, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. He wasn't a man who waited for justice to come to him. He would hunt it down, and he wouldn't rest until his son was back home. Meanwhile, Malik sat on a crumbling bench near a rundown playground, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He was no hero, just a boy who had survived a nightmare and was willing to face more to bring hope to another. He had seen too many broken children lost to a system that didn't care. But maybe, just maybe this time, things would be different. Because this time, he had a father who would fight. The dawn hadn't yet broken when Andrew Winslow's phone vibrated insistently on the marble countertop of his private kitchen. His eyes were bloodshot, face pale but determined. He had barely slept. Images of Malik's words and the photo of his son haunted him. He reached for the phone. "Mr. Winslow," the voice on the other end was cautious, official. "Detective Marianne Graves. We've started reviewing the information you sent. There are complications." Andrew rubbed his temples. "Complications? What kind?" "The buyers are connected to powerful families, people with influence over law enforcement. Some of the officers assigned to these cases are compromised." Andrew's jaw tightened. He had suspected as much. The rot ran deeper than he'd imagined. "Then we'll have to do this differently," he said quietly. "We can't trust the system. Not yet." A soft knock at the door interrupted the call. Malik stood in the doorway, clutching his torn backpack, eyes tired but resolute. Andrew glanced at the boy. "Come in." Malik stepped forward, shifting his weight, the limp evident but ignored. "You should rest," Andrew said. Malik shook his head. "No time. We have to find out who bought your son." "The name I saw. I can describe him." Andrew motioned for Malik to sit. He pulled out a notebook and a pen, ready to capture every detail. As Malik spoke, his voice steady but haunted, he described the buyer's face, the sharp jawline, the cold eyes, the expensive suit. A man used to power, privilege, and silence. Andrew's mind raced. Could this be the key, the lead to his son? Outside the gleaming skyscraper of Winslow Enterprises, a dark undercurrent was stirring. In a smoke-filled room, a group of men in tailored suits gathered. They spoke in low voices, their faces masks of calm, but their eyes sharp with calculation. "We have a problem," one said. "Winslow is digging too deep." Another nodded. "The boy who spoke to him, a runaway from the camps. Dangerous." "We cut the source," the third declared, "and remind Winslow who holds the power here." The men poured drinks, the clink of crystal glasses echoing like a sinister promise. Back at the apartment where Malik had spent countless nights, the air was heavy with tension. Malik's mother, Clara, sat knitting silently in the dim light. She looked older than her years, worry etched in every line of her face. Malik entered, exhaustion shadowing his youthful features. "They're watching," he said simply. Clara looked up, her eyes fierce. "Then we keep moving." She pulled out a worn photo of Malik as a toddler, smiling and unscarred. "You're stronger than they think," she whispered. Malik nodded, steeling himself. He knew the dangers, but he also knew this was bigger than him. Andrew's office was a fortress of technology and security. Screens flickered with surveillance footage, encrypted files, and news reports. He sat with his trusted legal advisor, Rachel Moore, a sharp-minded woman with no tolerance for nonsense. "We can't go public yet," Rachel warned. "If the media catches wind before we have proof, the whole thing will be buried." Andrew leaned forward, hands clasped. "Then we gather evidence, we find his son, and we expose the network." Rachel frowned. "The buyers are connected to senators, judges, even federal agents. They control everything." Andrew's eyes burned with resolve. "Then, we fight their control." Days passed in a blur of secret meetings, late-night research, and cautious phone calls. Malik led Andrew through a maze of forgotten streets, abandoned warehouses, and dark alleys where children were hidden like treasure in the black market. They spoke with others like Malik, runaways, survivors, witnesses, each story a thread in the tapestry of corruption. Andrew felt his world shift. The power he had once wielded seemed trivial compared to the lives lost in silence. At a dimly lit diner, Malik and Andrew met with an informant, an ex-cop turned whistleblower named Carter. Carter's hands shook as he slid over a file thick with names, dates, and transactions. "They call it the auction," Carter whispered. "High-profile buyers, under-the-radar deals, children moved like merchandise." Andrew scanned the document, a chill running down his spine. "This has to end," he said. Carter nodded. "They'll come for us if they find out." Malik's eyes darkened. "Let them come." Meanwhile, the shadowy men orchestrating the ring tightened their grip. An anonymous tip was sent to Andrew's company, warning him to cease his investigation. Threatening messages followed, calls in the dead of night, a burned-out car outside his mansion. Yet Andrew stood firm. His team increased security, he hired private investigators. But the threats escalated. One evening, Malik returned home to find his mother's apartment ransacked, papers torn, belongings scattered. Clara stood defiantly, eyes blazing. "They want us afraid," she said. "But fear won't break us." Malik helped her clean, the weight of danger pressing on them both. Andrew and Malik knew time was running out. They planned a bold move to confront the buyer Malik had seen and gather undeniable proof. Under the cover of night, they followed leads to a luxurious estate on the city's outskirts. Hidden in the shadows, Malik's voice was barely a whisper. "That's him." Andrew's heart pounded. They watched as men in suits entered the mansion, children's laughter faint in the background. The next day, Andrew met with a trusted senator who had expressed concern about corruption. "We need allies," Andrew said. "People willing to fight this from within." The senator nodded cautiously. "But the risk is high. They're powerful." Andrew looked out the window, the city sprawling beneath him. "Then we make it impossible for them to hide." Meanwhile, Malik's world grew darker. One night, as he walked home, a group of men blocked his path. Words were exchanged, threats made, but Malik's spirit didn't falter. He remembered his mother's words. "Strength comes from knowing what you fight for." Back in the boardroom, Andrew presented the mounting evidence to his closest advisors, faces hardened with determination. "This network must be dismantled," he declared. "We'll create a task force, public exposure, no hiding." Malik, meanwhile, began training with former law enforcement allies Andrew had brought in. He learned to protect himself, to gather intelligence, to fight not just with courage, but with strategy. One evening, as Andrew walked the city streets with Malik, he saw the boy not just as a victim, but as a leader, a symbol of resistance. "Together," Andrew said quietly, "we'll bring him home." Malik smiled for the first time in days. "Let's finish this." The pressure mounted. The corrupt network pushed back harder. Andrew's phone buzzed incessantly. Leaks, warnings, betrayals from unexpected places. But he kept fighting. Because his son was out there. Because Malik's voice had awakened a fire in him he never knew existed. And as the city slept, the battle for truth, justice, and freedom was only beginning. The morning air was sharp, biting through the city streets like a warning. Andrew Winslow stood outside the courthouse, his breath visible in the cold dawn light. Today was no ordinary day. Today, the fight that had started in shadows was about to step into the light. Beside him, Malik's limp was less noticeable, his posture steadier. The boy who had once been invisible to the world now carried a quiet strength that belied his years. He had become the beacon of truth in a city built on lies. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Reporters, cameras, and a crowd of onlookers packed the hallways. Names whispered in secret meetings were now splashed across headlines. Senators, judges, high-profile businessmen. The elite adoption ring was no longer a secret. Andrew adjusted his tie, his eyes scanning the faces around him. Lawyers, activists, and those who had suffered gathered, united by a shared purpose, to end the darkness that had stolen so many children. The judge called the courtroom to order. The trial would begin. Malik sat beside Andrew at the defense table, clutching the worn photo of his son. It was a reminder of everything at stake. The prosecution presented their evidence with precision. Financial records, secret communications, eyewitness testimonies, a damning tapestry of corruption and greed. Then came Malik's moment. Called to the stand, he stood tall, voice steady as he recounted his story. The kidnapping, the van, the buyers, the hidden network. Every word pierced the silence. The courtroom was rapt, disbelief mixing with outrage. Andrew watched as Malik's courage silenced skeptics. The boy's truth was undeniable. Outside, the media frenzy exploded. Social networks buzzed with outrage and hope. But inside, the fight was far from over. Corrupt officials tried to undermine the case, delay proceedings, intimidate witnesses. Threats were whispered, deals offered in shadowed corridors. Yet Andrew and Malik pressed forward. Late one evening, Malik received an encrypted message. "They're coming for you." Fear flared for a moment, but he pushed it down. With Andrew's protection and a growing circle of allies, he refused to back down. They intensified their investigation, uncovering more names, judges, police officers, politicians, all complicit. Each revelation was a blow to the corrupt empire. Then came the breakthrough. Andrew's private investigators traced financial transactions to a secluded estate, the buyer Malik had described. With a small, trusted team, they planned a raid. In the dead of night, law enforcement, led by Andrew's allies, stormed the estate. Children hidden in secret rooms were found, frightened but alive. Among them, Andrew's son. The reunion was silent at first. Disbelief, tears, a father's arms finally around his child. The news broke worldwide. The trial accelerated, evidence overwhelming. Public pressure mounted. The corrupt elite were unmasked. In a packed courtroom, the judge read the verdict. Guilty on all counts, the ring dismantled, justice served. Malik stood with Andrew afterward, looking out over the city skyline. "You did it," Malik said softly. "No," Andrew replied. "We did it, because you spoke up, because you believed." Malik smiled, hope bright in his eyes. The fight had been long and painful, but they had changed the world. And for the first time in years, Andrew's son was truly home.